If you look again at the economies of Southeast Asia, a lot of them actually specialize exports to the US. There will be some level of competition with overlapping products, but overall, I think that that you probably will not see that much competition with regards to exports to the US. What you're going to see happen, in my view, is that you probably see a lot more of the ASEAN economies trying to diversify exports away from the US. And going to Europe, more to China, intra-ASEAN trade, for example. These are areas that I think potentially could see some interesting developments.
So let's talk about China now, because again, a lot of these tariffs also happen against under the specter of growing influence, trade influence that's from China here in Southeast Asia. What does this mean for China at the moment, and how does this perhaps influence the trade relations between these parts of the world and China, especially given the fact that we've seen these tariffs now seemingly finalized, at least for the time being?
So I think right now the question everyone's asking, what tariff is China going to get from the US? I don't think it's been announced yet. I'm correct, right? So it's not been announced yet. So I think that what number comes out is going to be quite an interesting, I think, thing to look at. But again, if you look at what China is doing, China is the only one that did not blink when Trump announced actually the initial tariffs. They actually fought back. They stood firm because they had goods that US could not do without. So I think the bargaining chips that they had were a lot higher than some of the ASEAN economies, for example, right? So I think that, again, what you see happening is that China is increasingly looking to deepen its trade relations with ASEAN, but also recently you also notice a lot of discussions happening between China and Europe, and even China, basically, and South Africa. So again, you will see that people are looking outside of the US to see where else they can actually look to increase their exports.
Yeah, and I think one thing that highlights your point there also is that you've seen the other BRICS nations, Russia, India, Brazil, and South Africa, all get tariffs. And China, they seem to be holding off because, again, it might be important to get that particular relationship right, at least if I was sitting in the White House, which I'm not. When we look at how China, when you look at how China is also approaching Southeast Asia, what might matter more the investments into Southeast Asia rather than the trade, actually. How do you see that relationship perhaps evolving right now with regards to China's, the trends at least with regards to investment flows into these parts of the world, like the Southeast Asias of the world or the developing parts of the world coming from Beijing?
I see it deepening. I mean, there's only one way to go, and that's to deepen and broaden. And again, I mean, there are anecdotal evidence you can actually see in Southeast Asia. For example, the popular consumer brands, you had Luckin brand, you have Chaggy, you have Michelin, brands that I never heard of, and they're coming basically to the Southeast Asian markets because they see Southeast Asia as an important consumer market.
Right. You see these American brands now coming into Southeast Asia, for instance, with lower trade barriers, as the White House says, with lower tariffs. But again, if you're competing against China that seems to have the upper hand with regards to price in a very price-sensitive area as well, do the lower tariffs or trade barriers for you American goods actually make a difference in helping them compete against other goods, say from the countries or say from these Chinese brands and companies that are coming into Southeast Asia more in higher volumes, for instance?
Yeah. I would say two things about this, right? One, if you look again at the China economy, roughly only about the average margin that in most of the industrial players has about 15%. So the tariffs come out high at 30-35%, it's going to hurt them. I don't think they can be competitive and remain viable if the tariffs are too high. So and that's the reason why I think that if they come to ASEAN, there are no tariffs in ASEAN, not yet anyway. But I don't think it's going to happen, because I think that they want to deepen the relationship, and because of the higher margins here, I would see that that you would continue to see Chinese brands coming out into ASEAN. But of course, I think that what we don't want to happen is that the Chinese goods flood the markets, and then basically everyone gets upset.
And there are signs that is beginning to happen, right?
Exactly.
Including out here in Southeast Asia. Carol, very quickly, before we let you go, I'm looking at a report here that CGS, your shop, China Galaxy Securities, as well as China International Capital Corporation, CICC, are set to launch funds worth about $1 billion in Southeast Asia to try and get part of that lucrative business there. Are you doing it together with CICC or separately, or how's this going to work?
I think that statement is misleading. I mean, I think that it's talking about the different funds being launched by CICC and ourselves.
Got it.
And for us, we always look to diversify our asset classes, and private equity is one of them. But still very early days. I think that, like I said, there's, we are definitely not doing it together with CICC.